The drums began at midnight, though no hands touched them. Deep, hollow sounds echoed through the village of Quatara, shaking the very earth beneath sleeping huts. Children woke crying. Elders sat up, eyes wide with ancient fear. The drums lived in the sacred square, wrapped in red cloth, forbidden to all but the chief drummer during ceremonies. Yet tonight they thundered alone, calling. 15-year-old Zamwi ran barefoot through the darkness, her wrapper loose around her thin frame. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She did not know why she ran toward the sound while everyone else hid. Something pulled her forward, an invisible thread wrapped around her chest. When she reached the square, the drums fell silent. The sudden quiet was worse than the noise. Zamwi stood alone in the moonlight, breathing hard, her shadow stretching long and strange across the dust. Then she heard it. Voices. Old men chanting in the sacred tongue, their words rising from the darkness like smoke. And in the center of their chant, over and over, they spoke her name. Zamwi. The girl born wrong. Quatara was a village that knew how to hate quietly. It was not a place of shouting or open violence. Instead, cruelty wore soft clothes and gentle faces. When Zamwi walked to the stream each morning, women turned their backs. When she passed the market, traders covered their wares as if her shadow could spoil them. Children played in the dust until she approached, then scattered like frightened birds. The hatred was in the silence. In the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. In the way her footsteps echoed alone on paths that should have been filled with laughter and noise. Even the dogs learned to avoid her, slinking away with their tails low. Zamwi had learned to move like a ghost through her own village. She spoke only when necessary. She kept her eyes down. She made herself small, hoping that if she took up less space, caused less trouble, perhaps they would forget to hate her. But they never forgot. Old Nkaruka, who sold palm oil by the roadside, would spit 3 times after Zamwi passed. The gesture was small, quick, but Zamwi always heard it. That soft sound of rejection. That ancient sign of warding off evil. And each time, something inside her died a little more. They had called her born wrong, for as long as she could remember. Even before she understood the words, she felt their weight. As a child, she would ask her mother why the other children would not play with her. Why the women pulled their babies close when she walked by. Why the elders looked through her as if she were smoke. Her mother, Ebel, never gave her real answers. Only sad smiles and whispered words. You are my daughter. That is all that matters. But it did not feel like enough when Zamwi sat alone during festivals, watching other girls dance in circles she was never invited to join. The rejection had shaped her like water-shaped stone, slowly wearing away at her until she believed what they said. Perhaps she was cursed. Perhaps something truly was wrong with her. Perhaps she deserved the loneliness that followed her like a second shadow. At night, when the hurt became too heavy, she would cry into her sleeping mat. Her mother would hold her then, smoothing her hair with gentle hands, humming old songs that had no words. But even her mother's love could not fill the emptiness left by an entire village's hatred. Zamwi grew up believing she was a mistake. Something broken that could never be fixed. Ebel was a woman made of silence. She moved through the world with her head bowed, her steps careful, as if walking on ground that might crack beneath her. She rarely spoke to anyone, and when she did, her voice was soft as falling leaves. The villagers said she had been beautiful once, but sorrow had carved lines too deep into her face. Zamwi noticed strange things about her mother. Rules that made no sense. Ebel would never let Zamwi sleep facing the forest. She made Zamwi wear a small leather pouch around her neck, filled with herbs and something else Zamwi could not name. Every night before sleep, Ebel would pray, but not to the gods everyone else prayed to. Her prayers were different, desperate, full of words that sounded like begging. Sometimes Zamwi would wake to find her mother staring at her in the darkness, tears streaming silently down her face. "Mama, why are you crying?" Zamwi would ask. But Ebel would only shake her head and whisper, "Sleep, my child. Sleep while you still can." There were scars on her mother's arms. Old scars, white and twisted, like ropes wrapped beneath her skin. When Zamwi asked about them, Ebel pulled her sleeves down quickly. "Old wounds," she said, "from before you were born." But her eyes held secrets deeper than any wound. Ebel died on a night when the moon hid its face. Zamwi woke to find her mother's body cold beside her, eyes open but seeing nothing. There had been no sickness, no warning. One moment Ebel had been alive, humming her wordless songs. The next she was gone, as if something had simply reached in and pulled her spirit away. The village buried her at the edge of the ancestral forest, where the forgotten dead were laid. No one came to mourn except Zamwi. The grave diggers worked quickly, avoiding Zamwi's eyes, whispering protection prayers under their breath. They lowered Ebel's wrapped body into the earth and covered it fast, as if afraid the ground might reject her. Zamwi knelt by the fresh grave, too shocked for tears. She felt hollow. Empty. Her mother had been the only person in the world who loved her, and now even that was gone. As the last handful of dirt fell, something strange happened. The earth trembled. Just once. A deep shudder that made the trees sway and birds scatter from their branches. The grave diggers dropped their tools and ran. One of them looked back at Zamwi with pure terror in his eyes. "It has begun," he whispered. Then he was gone. 3 days after the burial, the crops began to die. It started with Nkaruka's yam field, the same woman who spat whenever Zamwi passed. She woke to find her entire harvest withered overnight, the leaves black as if burned by invisible fire. She wailed in her field, tearing at her clothes, calling on the gods for mercy. But mercy did not come. Next was Okoye's cassava farm. He had once thrown stones at Zamwi when she was a child, laughing as she ran. Now his cassava roots rotted in the ground, soft and stinking. His family would go hungry this season. One by one, the farms closest to those who had been cruelest began to fail. Only those. The pattern was too clear to ignore. Fields belonging to kind people remained green and healthy. But anyone who had spoken against Zamwi, who had turned their back on her, who had made her life pain, they watched their crops wither and die. The village gathered in frightened groups, whispering. They looked at Zamwi differently now. Not with contempt, but with fear. Fear was worse. Contempt kept its distance, but fear made people dangerous. Someone finally said what they were all thinking. "It is her. The girl. She is doing this." And everyone believed it. Zamwi did not understand what was happening. She tried to stay away from the village, spending her days by the river where her mother used to wash clothes. She would sit on the smooth stones and cry, missing Ebel with an ache that felt like dying. One afternoon, as tears streamed down her face, something impossible happened. The river began to rise. Slowly at first, then faster. The water swelled and churned, climbing up the banks, reaching toward her as if trying to comfort her. Zamwi jumped back, terrified, and the water stopped immediately. When she stopped crying, the river returned to its normal flow. She tried it again the next day, not believing what she had seen. She let herself weep, and again the river responded, rising and swirling, its voice growing loud. This time she did not run. She watched in horror and wonder as the water danced to her sorrow. Word spread quickly. A woman had seen it happen. Soon everyone knew. The cursed girl could control the river with her tears. Children were forbidden from playing near the water. Mothers clutched their babies tighter. The elders met in urgent council, their voices sharp with panic. When a young boy slipped near the riverbank and nearly drowned, everyone blamed Zamwi, though she had been nowhere near. They did not need proof. Fear had already decided. The animals were the strangest sign of all. It began with Adana's goats. She was leading them to graze when they passed Zamwi on the path. Suddenly, all 7 goats stopped. They turned toward Zamwi and slowly lowered themselves to their knees. Their heads bowed as if before a chief. Adana screamed and pulled at their ropes, but they would not rise until Zamwi had walked past. Then they stood calmly and continued grazing as if nothing had happened. Birds began to circle above Zamwi's head wherever she walked. Not attacking, just circling, their shadows drawing patterns in the dust. Dogs that once avoided her now whimpered and crawled on their bellies when she approached, their eyes wide and submissive. Even the elders' prized rooster, a fierce bird that attacked anyone who came near, went silent and still when Zamwi passed its pen. It lowered its proud head and made soft, frightened sounds. The villagers saw these things and their fear turned to terror. This was not normal. This was not natural. Whatever lived inside the girl was growing stronger, revealing itself day by day. The animals knew something humans were only beginning to understand. Zamwi was not just cursed. She was powerful. And power in the hands of the rejected was the most dangerous thing of all. The elders summoned Zamwi to the sacred Irako tree, where justice was decided and fates were sealed. 7 old men sat in a half-circle on wooden stools, their faces hard as stone. Chief Dubam sat in the center, wearing his ceremonial beads and leopard skin. His eyes were cold when they fell on Zamwi. "Girl," he began, his voice deep and final, "you have brought evil to this village. Since your mother's death, our crops fail, our river rebels, our animals forget their nature. We see the signs. We know what you are." Zamwi opened her mouth to speak, but Elder Azubike raised his staff. "Silence. We did not call you here to speak. We called you here to hear judgment." Her heart hammered. She looked at their faces, searching for mercy but found none. These were the men who had watched her suffer her whole life and done nothing. Now they would blame her for suffering they themselves had caused. Your mother protected you while she lived, Chief Dubum continued. But she is gone now. And we will not let this village be destroyed by inherited evil. You will leave Quatara. You have until the new moon to gather what little you own and go. If you remain after that, we will take stronger measures. The words hit Zamwi like stones. Exile. They were casting her out completely. She had nothing. Nowhere to go. But in their eyes she saw something worse than hatred. She saw fear. And fear would make them do terrible things. That night, Zamwi went to her mother's grave. She fell to her knees on the fresh earth and pressed her hands against it, as if she could somehow reach through the soil and touch Ebel one last time. Mama, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please. I need you. Tell me what is happening. Tell me why they hate me. Tell me who I really am. The grave was silent. Only the wind answered, rustling through the leaves of the nearby trees. Zamwi wept until her tears made mud of the dirt beneath her hands. She begged. She pleaded. She screamed her questions into the darkness. But the dead do not answer the living. Not in ways we can easily understand. She lay there until the moon rose high, exhausted and empty. Just as she began to stand, she heard it. A sound so faint she almost missed it. A whisper carried on the wind, coming not from the grave but from the forest beyond. Zamwi. Her name. Soft as breath. Gentle as her mother's voice once was. But it was not her mother speaking. It was something else. Something old. Something that had been waiting for this moment. Zamwi, the voice called again. Come. It is time you knew the truth. She looked toward the dark line of trees. Every instinct told her to run. But she had nothing left to lose. So Zamwi stood, brushed the dirt from her wrapper, and walked toward the ancestral forest. Toward the place where no one returned unchanged. The forest swallowed her whole. One moment she was standing at its edge, the next she was deep within its shadows, surrounded by trees so old they seemed to hold their own memories. The air was thick and cool, heavy with the smell of damp earth and ancient things. Zamwi walked without knowing which direction to go. Her feet moved on their own, following a path she could not see but somehow felt. Moonlight barely reached through the canopy above, turning the world silver and strange. Every sound made her jump. The crack of branches. The rustle of unseen creatures. The whisper of wind through leaves that sounded almost like voices. She should have been terrified. But instead she felt something else. Recognition. As if this place knew her. As if she had been here before in some life she could not remember. The path led her deeper and deeper, past trees whose trunks were wider than huts, past streams that glowed faintly in the darkness, past stones carved with symbols she did not recognize but felt in her bones. Then, without warning, the path ended. Zamwi stopped. Before her stood a small clearing, perfectly round, where the moonlight fell full and bright. And in the center of that clearing, waiting for her as if he had been there for centuries, stood a figure. Neither fully man nor fully spirit. Something in between. Something that existed in the spaces where the living and the dead touched. He was tall and thin, dressed in cloth that seemed woven from shadow and starlight. His face shifted constantly, never quite settling into one form. Sometimes young, sometimes old, sometimes not human at all. But his eyes, those stayed the same. Deep and endless, holding knowledge that hurt to look at too long. Zamwi, he said, and his voice was many voices speaking at once. Men and women, young and old, but mostly it was the voices of women. Mothers, grandmothers, daughters, all speaking through him like wine through a hollow reed. Who are you? She whispered, her legs trembling. I am the keeper of forgotten things, he said. I am the voice of those who were silenced. I am the memory that villages try to bury. And I have been waiting for you. He stepped closer, and Zamwi felt power radiating from him like heat from fire. Your mother sent me, he continued, his voice softening to something almost gentle. Before she died, she came to this forest and made me promise. Promise to find you when the time came. Promise to tell you what she could not say while she lived. Zamwi's breath caught. You knew my mother? I know everyone who enters this forest seeking truth, he replied. But yes, I knew Ebel. I knew her real name, the one she had before sorrow renamed her. I knew what she sacrificed, what she gave up to protect you. And now, child, it is time you knew too. Long ago, the keeper began, his voice dropping into the rhythm of story, this village faced a curse. A terrible sickness swept through Quadara, killing the children first, then the elders, then everyone in between. Crops turned to ash. Wells dried up. The sky itself seemed angry, bleeding red at dawn and dusk. Zamwi listened, her heart racing. The elders went to the greatest diviner in the land. He cast his bones and shells and read the future in smoke and blood. His answer was clear. The gods were angry. They demanded payment. A human offering. A sacrifice so pure, so innocent, it would cleanse the village's sins and break the curse. The keeper's face flickered, showing glimpses of terrible things. The spirits chose their victim. A child not yet born. A baby still sleeping in its mother's womb. Your mother's womb, Zamwi. The elders came to Ebel when she was 6 months with child. They told her the gods had chosen. Her baby must die so the village could live. Zamwi gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. No. Yes, the keeper said, his many voices heavy with sorrow. They prepared the ritual. They sharpened the sacred blade. They painted Ebel with the death marks. And they waited for her to give birth, so they could take you from her arms and spill your blood on the altar. Zamwi felt sick. Her whole body shook. But I am alive. I am here. Because, the keeper said, his eyes burning now, your mother said no. Ebel was a quiet woman, the keeper continued. Gentle. Obedient. All her life she had followed rules, bowed to authority, accepted her place. But when they came for her child, something inside her broke open. Or perhaps it was not breaking. Perhaps it was waking up. Zamwi could barely breathe. She pictured her mother, young and pregnant and terrified, facing down the entire village. She came to this forest in the dead of night. She walked past the boundary stones where the living are not supposed to cross. She called out to the old spirits, the ones who do not answer to human gods. And she made them an offer they could not refuse. What offer? Zamwi whispered. Herself, the keeper said simply. She offered her own life in exchange for yours. But the spirits, they are not simple creatures. They do not deal in clean trades. They saw something in Ebel's desperation. A loophole. A way to satisfy the gods' demand without killing an innocent child. The keeper moved closer, his voice dropping to something almost tender. They made a covenant. The curse would not be broken but bound. Tied not to the village but to you. Sleeping inside you like a seed waiting for rain. You would live. You would grow. But you would carry the weight of that old offering inside your blood. And when injustice reached its peak, when cruelty finally overflowed, the curse would wake. Not to destroy you but through you. Zamwi felt cold. Everything made sense now. Too much sense. So I am cursed. No, the keeper said firmly. You are chosen. The covenant had rules, the keeper explained, his many voices weaving the words like thread. The curse would sleep as long as the village remained just. As long as they treated the weak with kindness and the stranger with mercy. But if they fell back into their old ways, if they let cruelty grow again like weeds in a garden, the curse would stir. Would watch. And when it saw enough, it would wake. Zamwi's mind raced, connecting pieces she had never understood before. That is why my mother kept me hidden. Why she taught me to be small and quiet. Yes, the keeper nodded. She hoped that if you caused no trouble, if you drew no attention, perhaps the villagers would forget the old story. Perhaps the curse would never need to wake. She took the scars on her arms as payment for the covenant. Every year on your birthday, the spirits would come and take a piece of her life force. Slowly draining her so you could live. Tears streamed down Zamwi's face. She was dying to keep me alive. Love always costs something, the keeper said gently. But Ebel paid willingly. She watched you grow, watched you suffer their hatred, and it broke her heart. But she could not defend you too strongly. Could not draw attention to how special you really were. So she loved you in silence and hoped it would be enough. But she died, Zamwi sobbed. Why did she die now? The keeper's expression grew dark. Because the covenant was complete. The curse is awake now, Zamwi. Fully awake. And it has been waiting to see what you would do with the power your mother died to give you. When Zamwi returned to the village at dawn, she found chaos waiting. People were shouting, running between huts, pointing fingers at neighbors. The fragile peace that fear had created was shattering. Secrets long buried were clawing their way to the surface. Adana stood in the center of the square, screaming accusations at Elder Obina. You stole my father's land. 20 years ago you forged the papers and took everything. I was just a child but I remember. I remember. Elder Obina's face went pale. He tried to speak but his voice came out as a croak. Others gathered, their own grievances pouring out like water from a broken dam. Old wounds. Old betrayals. The village was turning on itself, all the lies they had built their prosperity on suddenly exposed to daylight. Nkaruka collapsed in her doorway, clutching her chest. The woman who had spat at Zamwi every day now gasped for breath, her face twisted in pain. Her own cruelty was eating her from the inside. Okoye stumbled through the market, his hands covered in boils that had appeared overnight. He had beaten his wife for years, hidden behind closed doors. Now his body wore his sins like decorations. The curse was not random. It was not blind. It moved through the village like a surgeon's knife, cutting out only the infected parts. Those who had been kind, who had shown mercy even in small ways, they remained untouched. But the cruel, the greedy, the violent, they fell one by one. By midday the supernatural signs could no longer be ignored. Storm clouds gathered above Kwatara, black and churning, though the surrounding villages remained clear. Lightning cracked without thunder. Rain fell upward, drops rising from the ground toward the sky. The very air shimmered with power that made people's skin prickle and their teeth ache. In the sacred square, the drums began again. This time everyone heard them. They beat faster and faster, a rhythm that matched panicked heartbeats, driving people to the edge of madness. Some villagers covered their ears and screamed. Others ran in circles, not knowing where to go or what to do. Ancestral voices rose from the earth itself. Women's voices, old and young, speaking in the ancient tongue. They chanted names. Names of women who had died unjustly. Names of children sacrificed and forgotten. Names of daughters thrown away. The village had buried these names, tried to erase them from memory. But the dead do not forget. And now they were speaking. Chief Dubum tried to call for order, but his voice was drowned out. His ceremonial staff cracked in his hand, splitting down the middle. The leopard skin he wore began to rot, falling from his shoulders in pieces. He looked around wildly, searching for someone to blame, someone to punish. His eyes found Zamwi standing at the edge of the square, watching silently. "You," he shouted, pointing at her with a trembling finger. "You are doing this. Stop it. Stop it now." But Zamwi only smiled sadly. "I'm not doing anything, Chief. This is what justice looks like when it finally arrives." As the chaos grew, something remarkable happened. Those who had been kind began to glow. Literally glow. A soft golden light surrounded them, protecting them from the storm's fury. A young girl named Chinelo, who had once shared her food with Zamwi when no one was looking. An old man named Ifani, who had never spoken cruel words. A widow named Amara, who had smiled at Zamwi even when others turned away. They stood unharmed while destruction swirled around them. The rain did not touch them. The lightning avoided them. The voices did not frighten them. They looked at each other in wonder, realizing that their small acts of kindness had been recorded, remembered, weighed. Meanwhile, the cruel continued to suffer. Not all at once. Not in ways that killed. But in ways that forced them to feel what they had made others feel. Elder Azubike, who had ordered young girls beaten for minor offenses, now felt invisible hands striking him over and over. He fell to his knees, weeping, finally understanding the pain he had caused. The curse was not revenge. It was education. It was forcing people to wear the suffering they had inflicted on others. To walk in shoes they had filled with thorns. To taste the poison they had mixed for innocent mouths. And through it all, Zamwi watched. The power inside her thrummed like a second heartbeat, but she did not direct it. She did not need to. Justice knew where to go. The worst moment came when someone finally broke. Elder Chikwudi, the oldest among them, collapsed in the center of the square. He was over 90, his body bent with age. The golden light did not surround him. Instead, shadows pooled at his feet, thick and dark as old blood. "I will speak," he cried out, his voice cracking. "I will tell the truth we buried." Everyone froze. Even the drums quieted slightly. Chikwudi crawled forward, his hands shaking. 30 years ago, he began, when the sickness came we were afraid. Afraid of dying. Afraid of losing everything. The diviner told us what was needed. A pure sacrifice. An unborn child. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The younger villagers had not known this story. It had been carefully hidden, passed only among the elders. "We chose Ebel's child," Chikwudi continued, tears streaming down his weathered face. "We painted her with death marks. We sharpened the blade. But the night before the birth, Ebel disappeared. When she returned she was different. Changed. She said the covenant had been made. That the curse would be bound, not broken. We did not understand. We only knew the sickness stopped. The crops returned. We lived." He looked directly at Zamwi now. "But we were afraid of what lived inside you. So we made you suffer. We made sure you would never rise above us, never challenge us, never remember your power. We thought if we kept you broken, the curse would stay asleep forever. Silence. Heavy and complete. We were wrong, Chikwudi whispered. Forgive us. Forgive us. The confession broke something open. Power surged through Zamwi like a river bursting through a dam. She felt it rising, demanding release. The curse wanted to finish what it started. To judge every person who had caused suffering. To burn the village down to its foundations and start again from ash. She could do it. She felt the power in her blood, in her bones, in every breath. One word. One gesture. And Quadara would cease to exist. Everyone who had ever hurt her, everyone who had turned their back, everyone who had made her childhood a living nightmare, they would all face consequences beyond their worst fears. The elders fell to their knees, begging. Even Chief Dubum bowed his proud head. Please, they cried. Have mercy. We were wrong. We were so wrong. But do not destroy us all. Our children are innocent. Our grandchildren do not know what we did. Zamwi stood silent, feeling the weight of the choice before her. Revenge or mercy? Destruction or redemption? The curse whispered in her ear, urging violence. But beneath that voice she heard another. Softer. Gentler. Her mother's voice. Break the cycle, my daughter. Break what I could not break. Choose what I could not choose. Zamwi closed her eyes. The power thrummed inside her, eager, hungry. But she thought of Chinello's smile. Of Afani's kind eyes. Of Amara's gentle hand once touching her shoulder in comfort. Not everyone had been cruel. Some had tried in their small ways to be good. She walked to her mother's grave. Zamwi knelt on the earth that covered Ebel's body. She placed both hands flat against the ground and felt the pulse of life beneath. Her mother was not gone. Not entirely. Part of her lived in the soil, in the roots of trees, in the memory of kindness. Mama, Zamwi whispered, I understand now. I understand what you did. Why you stayed silent. Why you let them hurt me instead of destroying them. You were not weak. You were waiting. Waiting for me to be strong enough to make a different choice. The wind picked up, gentle and warm, carrying the scent of her mother's favorite flowers. Zamwi felt tears coming, but these were different tears. Not bitter. Not angry. Just sad. Sad for all the pain that could have been avoided if people had simply chosen love over fear. They made you suffer to protect me, Zamwi continued. And they made me suffer because they were afraid. But suffering does not heal suffering, does it? If I destroy them now, I become what they feared. I prove them right. The cycle continues. Someone else's daughter grows up broken. Someone else's mother dies in silence. The golden light that surrounded the kind villagers began to spread. Slowly. Gently. Moving outward like dawn pushing back night. It did not force itself. It simply offered. An invitation. A chance. I thank you, Mama, Zamwi said, her voice steady now. For giving me life. For teaching me even in silence what real strength looks like. And I promise you, I will not let your sacrifice be for nothing. Zamwi stood and turned to face the village. The power still thrummed inside her, but she held it differently now. Not as a weapon. As a tool. The curse began to shift, responding to her will rather than controlling it. The storm clouds slowly started to break apart. The rain ceased its upward climb and fell normally once more. The drums quieted to a whisper. Mercy is not weakness, she said, her voice carrying across the square. My mother taught me that. She could have cursed you all. Could have demanded your lives in payment. But she chose differently. She chose to carry the burden herself so that innocence would not suffer. The villagers listened, many openly weeping now. I could destroy this village, Zamwi continued. The power inside me wants to. Justice demands it. But what would that solve? Would it bring back my childhood? Would it heal the wounds you carved into my heart? Would it make my mother's sacrifice mean something? She shook her head slowly. No. Destruction is easy. Any fool with power can destroy. True strength is knowing when to stop. When to say, enough. The cycle ends here. With me. The golden light spread wider, touching even some who had been cruel. Not all. Some were too far gone, too deep in their own darkness. But others, those who truly regretted, who truly wanted to change, the light found them. It did not erase their sins. It simply offered a chance to do better. To be better. The curse is dissolving, Zamwi said. But it will leave something behind. A memory. A reminder. This village will never forget what happened here. And if cruelty rises again, if you forget the lessons learned in blood and tears, the spirits will remember. They are always watching. In the days that followed, Quadara began to rebuild. Not just the damaged huts or the broken fences, but something deeper. The village itself was different now. Humbler. Quieter. People walked more carefully, spoke more gently. They looked at each other with new eyes, seeing the humanity they had forgotten was there. The elders who survived, including Chief Dubum, stepped down from their positions. They were too tainted by the old ways. New leaders emerged. Younger. Wiser. Including Chinelo, the girl who had shared her food. She became chief, and her first act was to create a new law. No child would ever be cast out for being different. No woman would ever be forced into silence. The village created a shrine at Ebel's grave. They brought flowers and food offerings. They told her story honestly, holding nothing back. The woman who had sacrificed everything. The mother who loved so fiercely she changed fate itself. Children learned her name in school. Singers made songs about her courage. As for those who had been too cruel, who had refused to change even when offered mercy, they left voluntarily. The village no longer felt like home to them. The golden light burned their eyes. The spirits whispered too loudly in their ears. One by one they departed, carrying their shame to distant places. Quadara survived, but it was never the same. And that was good. The old village had been built on buried sin. This new one would be built on remembered truth. Zamwi prepared to leave. Not because she was forced, but because she chose to. The village had changed, yes, but some wounds do not heal even in transformed places. She had spent too much of her life here being small, being afraid. Now she wanted to see what existed beyond the boundaries she had never been allowed to cross. On her last morning, Chinelo came to see her. The new chief embraced Zamwi like a sister. "Stay," she said. "This is your home too now. We want to make it right." But Zamwi smiled and shook her head. "Some bridges cannot be rebuilt. But that does not mean I hate you. I do not. I hope you build something beautiful here. Something my mother would be proud of." Others came too. Ifani gave her supplies for the journey.